The great crystal towers of Nexus Prime shimmered in the light of three suns. Inside the tallest tower, Emperor Valthan sat on his throne of living metal. The Emperor was not like humans. His body was made of clear crystal that changed colors, with his moods. Right now those colors were dark red and black. He was angry. "Tell me again," Valthan said to the small alien standing before him. His voice sounded like breaking glass. "What did the humans do?" The alien was Malthorn, High Inquisitor of the Empire. He was short and fat, with green skin that looked wet all the time. His many eyes blinked as he spoke. "Your Majesty, the humans, have broken our laws in 17 different systems," Malthorn said. His voice shook with fear. "They have built colonies where no one should live. They trade with primitive species we told them to avoid. And worst of all, they refuse to pay tribute." Emperor Valthan stood up. He was 12 feet tall when he did this. The crystal of his body flashed bright red. "Refuse to pay tribute?" he asked. "No species has ever refused to pay tribute to the Empire. Not in 3,000 years. Malthorn nodded quickly. "Yes, Your Majesty. When our tax collectors went to their worlds, the humans just said no. They even gave our collectors something, called coffee, and talked to them for hours about something they called freedom." The Emperor walked to a huge window that looked out over the capital city. Millions of beings from hundreds of different worlds lived here. All of them obeyed the Empire. All of them paid their tribute. All of them knew their place. Freedom. Valthan said the word like it tasted bad. What do they know of freedom? The Empire gives them safety, the Empire gives them order, the Empire gives them peace. "The humans seem to have different ideas, Your Majesty," Malthorn said carefully. Far away in a system the Empire called Sol 3, Commander Lee Deho stood on the observation deck of a space station. He was a tall man with kind eyes and black hair. He wore the blue uniform of the Human Space Service. Outside the window he could see ships from many different worlds coming and going. This was Kepler Station, one of humanity's newest outposts. Lee's communication device buzzed. The face of Captain Park Minji appeared on the small screen. She was younger than Lee, with short hair and a smile that never seemed to go away. "Commander," she said, "we just got word from Earth. The Empire sent us a message." "What kind of message?" Lee asked. "The kind that usually comes with threats," Park said. "Admiral Kim wants all senior officers back on Earth for an emergency meeting." Lee nodded. He had been expecting this. The Empire did not like it when people said no to them, and humanity had been saying no to them for months now. On Earth, in a building that had once been called the United Nations, representatives from every country sat around a large table. They called themselves the United Defense Council now. At Tiu, the head of the table sat Admiral Kim Wonho, an older man with gray hair and scars on his hands from the old wars. The message from the Empire played on a large screen. High Inquisitor Malthorn's wet face filled the screen as he read from a crystal tablet. "By order of His Imperial Majesty, Emperor Valthan, the species known as humans will submit to Imperial rule within 7 standard rotations. You will pay all back tribute. You will remove your colonies from restricted systems. You will cease all trade with primitive worlds. If you do not obey, the Empire will take action. You have been warned." The message ended. The room was quiet for a moment. Then someone started to laugh. It was the representative from Korea. Soon, another person joined in. Then another. Within seconds, the entire room was laughing. Admiral Kim tried to keep a straight face, but he started to smile. The laughter went on for several minutes. Finally, Kim stood up and held up his hand for quiet. "Well," he said, "I think we all know what our answer is going to be." The representative from Brazil wiped tears from her eyes. "Are we really going to tell the Emperor of the Galaxy to go away?" "That's exactly what we're going to do," Kim said. "But we'll be polite about it." 20 minutes later, Admiral Kim sat in front of a camera. Behind him stood representatives from every nation on Earth. The message would go out on all frequencies, to every world in the Empire. "To His Imperial Majesty, Emperor Valthan," Kim began, "we have received your message. We have discussed your demands, and we have an answer for you. Kim paused and looked directly into the camera. No. The word hung in the air like a challenge. We will not submit to your rule, Kim continued. We will not pay tribute to someone who has never earned our respect. We will not abandon our colonies or stop trading with our friends. And if you think you can force us to do these things, then you are welcome to try. Kim stood up. Behind him, every representative on Earth did the same. You see, Your Majesty, we humans have a long history with bullies. We've dealt with emperors and kings and dictators for thousands of years, and we've learned something important. The only way to deal with a bully is to stand up to them. Kim smiled. It was not a nice smile. So here's our counteroffer. Leave us alone and we'll leave you alone. Keep trying to push us around, and you'll learn why every tyrant in human history eventually failed. The message ended with Admiral Kim and every representative on Earth doing something that would soon become famous across the galaxy. They all started laughing again. On Nexus Prime, Emperor Valthan watched the message 3 times. His crystal body turned darker with each viewing. When it was over, he stood up and walked to his window again. The city below looked smaller now somehow. Malthorn, he said without turning around. Yes, Your Majesty? Prepare the 9th Imperial Fleet. All ships. We are going to remind these humans why no one laughs at the Empire. How many ships should we send, Your Majesty? Emperor Valthan's body flashed bright white, the color of pure rage. All of them. The news spread like fire across the galaxy. On worlds that had never heard of humans before, people watched the message from Earth over and over. Some watched in fear, others watched in amazement. A few watched in hope. In the markets of Vega, Prime, traders stopped their work to talk about the strange species that had laughed at the Empire. On the mining worlds of the Outer Rim, workers whispered about humans during their breaks. Even on the core worlds, where loyalty to the Empire was strongest, people wondered what would happen next. Grand Admiral Zephyrus stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. The ship was 5 miles long and carried enough weapons to destroy a planet. Around him, 3,000 other ships prepared for war. It was the largest fleet ever assembled by the Empire. Zephyrus was Aquilian like the Emperor, but his crystal body was blue and silver instead of clear. He had won battles on 100 worlds. He had never lost a fight, but something about this mission felt different. Admiral, his aide said, all ships report ready for jump to hyperspace. Good, Zephyrus said. Set course for the Sol system. We will show these humans what happens when you insult the Empire. But as the great fleet jumped into hyperspace, they were not alone. Captain Park Minji watched from the shadow of an asteroid field as the Imperial ships disappeared into the void. Her ship, the Indomitable Spirit, was small and fast. The Empire's sensors could not see her. Well, she said to her crew, that's a lot of ships. Her weapons officer, Lieutenant Bei Suyung, grinned. Bei was known for being a little crazy, but she was the best pilot in the human space service. Good thing we're not planning to fight them ship to ship, Bei said. Park nodded. She activated her communication system and sent a message back to Earth. The message was short. Package is in the mail. Very big package. On Earth, Admiral Kim received the message in his underground command center. Around him, screens showed the positions of every human ship in space. There were not many of them. Compared to the Empire, humanity's fleet was tiny. But Kim was not worried. He had spent his whole life preparing for this moment. Not preparing to fight aliens exactly, but preparing to fight someone bigger and stronger than he was. That was what humans did best. Dr. Cho Hyun-soo walked into the command center carrying a cup of coffee. She was a small woman with thick glasses who looked like she belonged in a laboratory, not a war room. But she was the head of Earth's secret weapons program. How are our special projects coming along? Kim asked her. Better than expected, Cho said. She took a sip of her coffee. The stealth systems are working perfectly. The new shields are beyond anything we hoped for. And the surprise packages are ready to deploy. Kim smiled. What about the volunteers? Every ship captain in the fleet wants to join the mission, Cho said. I had to turn away 300 applications. This was not surprising. When Admiral Kim had asked for volunteers for a dangerous mission, almost every human in space had raised their hand. It was not because they wanted to die. It was because they understood what was at stake. Engineer Nam Jiwon was working late in her laboratory under the mountains of Colorado. She had been working for 3 days straight, making final adjustments to humanity's secret weapon. It was not a gun or a bomb. It was something much more dangerous to the Empire, an idea. Nam's shields could take the energy from enemy weapons and send it back at them, but that was not the clever part. The clever part was that the shields made human. Ships looked like they were breaking down when they were really getting stronger. Let them think we're weak, Nam said to herself as she made one last adjustment. We've been doing that for our whole history. Above Earth, the human fleet gathered. It was not an impressive sight. There were old military ships left over from the wars between Earth nations. There were trading vessels with guns bolted onto them. There were even some luxury yachts whose owners had volunteered for the fight. Lieutenant Colonel Jong Sung-hwan commanded one of these volunteer ships. The Star of Busan had been a passenger liner before the war. Now it carried missiles instead of tourists. Jong was not a professional soldier, but he had fought in 3 different wars on Earth. You know, he said to his crew, when I was a boy, I dreamed of fighting space battles. I just thought we'd have better ships. His crew laughed. They were all volunteers, too. Teachers, farmers, shopkeepers, and students who had left their normal lives to defend their world. The Imperial fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. 3,000 ships arranged themselves in perfect formation. At the E center was the Eternal Dominion. Its weapons pointed toward the small blue world that had dared to defy the Empire. Grand Admiral Zephyrus opened a communication channel to all human ships and colonies. This is Grand Admiral Zephyrus of the Imperial Navy, he said. You will surrender immediately. You will submit to Imperial rule. Any ship that resists will be destroyed. You have 1 hour to comply. The response came from Admiral Kim aboard the human flagship Defiance. This is Admiral Kim of the Human Space Service. We have considered your offer of surrender. Kim paused. Our answer is still no. Then you will be destroyed, Zephyrus replied. Maybe, Kim said. But we're going to make you work for it. On Earth, people watch the confrontation on their screens. In the streets of Seoul, crowds gathered around public displays. In New York, people stopped their cars to listen to the radio. In Lagos, families huddled around their televisions. They were not panicking. They were not running away. They were watching their representatives in space prepare to fight the largest empire in the galaxy. And somehow most of them were smiling. On the observation deck of Luna Station, Ambassador Yoon Tae-hyung watched the 2 fleets face each other. Yoon was a diplomat, not a soldier. His job was to talk to other species and make friends for humanity. But today his words would not be enough. Sir, his aide said, the orbital defenses are ready. The evacuation ships are standing by. Yoon nodded. If the human fleet lost, the Empire would attack Earth itself. Millions of people were ready to leave their homeworld rather than live under Imperial rule. What about the other species? Yoon asked. Have any of them offered to help? Officially, no, his aide replied. Unofficially, we're getting messages of support from dozens of worlds. Some are even sending supplies through the black market. This was better news than Yoon had expected. The Empire ruled through fear, but fear could only go so far. If humanity could show that the Empire could be defeated, other species might find their courage too. Grand Admiral Zephyrus looked at the human fleet through his ship's sensors. What he saw confused him. The human ships were not arranged in any formation he recognized. They seemed to be scattered randomly throughout the system. Some were hiding behind moons. Others were drifting near asteroid fields. A few were actually moving away from the battle area. Analysis, he ordered his tactical officer. Unknown, sir, came the reply. Their formation makes no sense. It's like they're not even trying to fight us. Zephyrus smiled. This would be easier than he had thought. The humans were clearly terrified and had no idea how to conduct a space battle. All ships, he commanded, Advance to attack formation. We will end this quickly. But as the Imperial fleet began to move, Admiral Kim was having a very different conversation on the bridge of the Defiance. All ships report ready, his tactical officer said. Good, Kim replied. Remember, we only get one chance at this. Make it count. Kim looked out at the approaching Imperial fleet, 3,000 ships, each one larger and more powerful than anything humanity had ever built. By every rule of warfare, this fight should be over before it started, but humans had never been very good at following rules. The first shot of the war came from the Eternal Dominion. A beam of pure energy, bright as a star, reached across space toward the human flagship Defiance. Everyone watching expected to see the human ship destroyed instantly. Instead, something impossible happened. The beam hit the Defiance and simply disappeared. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the human ship's shields glowed bright blue, and the same beam of energy shot back at the Imperial flagship. Grand Admiral Zephyrus watched in shock as his own weapon struck his own ship. The Eternal Dominion's shields held, but barely. Alarms rang throughout the bridge. What just happened? Zephyrus demanded. His science officer was staring at his instruments with wide eyes. Sir, they somehow absorbed our weapon and sent it back at us. I've never seen technology like this. Impossible, Zephyrus said. No species has shields that advanced. But Admiral Kim was smiling on the bridge of the Defiance. Engineer Nam's shield technology was working perfectly. The Empire's own weapons were now useless against humanity. All ships, Kim announced. You are free to engage. Show them what humans can do. What happened next would be talked about in military academies for centuries. The human fleet did not charge forward like brave warriors. They did not form battle lines like disciplined soldiers. Instead, they scattered like leaves in the wind, each ship moving in a different direction. To the Imperial fleet, it looked like the humans were running away. Grand Admiral Zephyrus ordered his ships forward, expecting an easy victory. That was his first mistake. Lieutenant Bei Su-young was flying her small fighter, the Wild Card, straight toward the Imperial fleet. Her ship was tiny compared to the massive alien vessels no bigger than a shuttle. The Imperial gunners barely noticed her. That was their second mistake. Bei flew her fighter directly under the belly of an Imperial cruiser. The alien ship was 2 miles long and carried 1,000 weapons, but none of them could point down far enough to hit her. Bei planted a series of small mines along the ship's hull and flew away. The mines did not explode right away. They waited until Bei was safely clear. Then they went off all at once, cutting through the cruiser's armor like it was paper. The great ship broke in half and died in space. One down, Bei said cheerfully over the radio. Who wants to try for 2? All across the battle zone, similar scenes were playing out. Human ships darted between the massive Imperial vessels like insects, too small and fast to hit easily. But unlike insects, these small ships had weapons that could hurt the giants. Captain Park Minji brought her ship, the Indomitable Spirit, alongside an Imperial battleship. The alien ship was 10 times larger than hers and had enough firepower to destroy a city. But Park knew something the aliens did not. She knew exactly where the battleship's weak spots were. For months, human ships had been following Imperial vessels, scanning them, learning their secrets. Captain Park knew that this particular class of battleship had a weakness in its reactor shielding. She fired a single missile at exactly the right spot. The battleship exploded from the inside out. Target destroyed, Park reported calmly. Moving to next target. Engineer Nam was watching the battle from Earth's command center. Her shields were performing better than she had hoped. Every time an Imperial ship fired at a human vessel, the energy was absorbed and sent back. The Empire was literally defeating itself with its own weapons. But the real surprise was still to come. Dr. Cho had spent years preparing for this battle. She had studied every species in the Empire, learning how they fought, how they thought, what they expected from their enemies. And she had prepared surprises for each of them. Deploy Package Alpha, she ordered. Across the battle zone, objects that looked like asteroids suddenly came to life. They were not asteroids at all, but human minds disguised to look like space. Rocks. The Imperial fleet had flown right into the middle of a minefield without knowing it. The mines exploded in a carefully planned sequence, creating gaps in the Imperial formation. Suddenly, the organized alien fleet was broken into smaller groups, each one isolated from the others. "Deploy Package Beta," Dr. Cho ordered. Now the second surprise revealed itself. Dozens of human ships that had been hiding in the asteroid belt suddenly appeared, their cloaking devices shutting off. The Imperial fleet found itself surrounded, with human ships attacking from every direction. Grand Admiral Zephyrus realized that the scattered human formation had not been chaos at all. It had been a trap. The humans had deliberately let the Imperial fleet surround them, then sprung their own surprise. "All ships reform battle line," Zephyrus ordered. "Concentrate fire on the human flagship." But his orders were too late. The Imperial fleet was scattered and confused. Their heavy weapons were designed to fight other large fleets in organized battles, not swarms of small, fast ships attacking from every direction. Lieutenant Colonel Zhong, commanding the converted passenger ship Star of Busan, found himself facing 3 Imperial destroyers at once. His ship was outnumbered and outgunned. By every rule of warfare, he should have retreated. Instead, he did something completely unexpected. He charged straight at the nearest destroyer. The Imperial captain was so surprised by this suicidal attack that he hesitated for just a moment. That moment was all Zhong needed. The Star of Busan flew over the destroyer, dropping a full load of missiles directly onto the alien ship's upper hull. The destroyer died in fire and metal. "Sir," Zhong's weapons officer said, "that was either brilliant or insane." "With humans," Zhong replied, "it's usually both." The battle had been going on for 2 hours when Grand Admiral Zephyrus finally understood what was happening. The humans were not just lucky or brave. They were fighting a completely different kind of war. Every other species the Empire had conquered fought the way they were expected to fight. They formed battle lines, fired their biggest guns, and tried to win through superior firepower. The humans ignored all the rules of civilized warfare. They hit and ran. They used tricks and traps. They turned the Empire's own weapons against them. Worst of all, they seemed to be enjoying themselves. "This is madness," Zephyrus said as another of his ships exploded. "No, sir," his tactical officer replied. "This is genius." The Imperial fleet was falling apart. Ships that had never known defeat were being destroyed by vessels that looked like they had been built in someone's garage. The mighty 9th Imperial Fleet, terror of the galaxy, was losing to a bunch of humans who treated war like a game. Admiral Kim watched the battle from the Bridge of the Defiance. Half the Imperial fleet was destroyed or damaged. The survivors were starting to pull back, trying to escape the chaos. "Should we pursue, sir?" his tactical officer asked. Kim thought about it. He could probably destroy the rest of the Imperial fleet if he wanted to, but that was not the point. The point was to show the galaxy that the Empire could be defeated. "Let them go," Kim said. "They need to tell the Emperor what happened here." Grand Admiral Zephyrus made the hardest decision of his military career. For the first time in 3,000 years, an Imperial fleet would retreat from battle. "All ships," he ordered, his voice heavy with defeat. "Fall back to hyperspace jump point. We are withdrawing." As the surviving Imperial ships limped away from the battle, the human fleet regrouped. They had lost 12 ships and fewer than 300 people. The Empire had lost over 1,500 ships and nearly 2 million crew members. But more importantly, they had lost something else: their reputation for being unbeatable. Admiral Kim opened a communication channel to all human ships and colonies. His message was simple: "Well done, everyone. Now let's see what the galaxy thinks of that." The galaxy was already starting to react. On worlds throughout the Empire, the news of humanity's victory was spreading faster than the Imperial censors could stop it. For the first time in centuries, subject species were starting to believe that freedom might be possible. The war was far from over, but something had changed. The Empire had been shown to be beatable, and humans had shown the galaxy a new way to fight. The news traveled faster than Imperial ships could carry it. On Vega Prime, the reptilian Thakari stopped working in their mines and gathered in the streets to watch the footage of human ships destroying Imperial vessels. On Proxima Centauri, the insectoid Klaxons clicked their mandibles in what might have been laughter. On 1,000 worlds across the galaxy, species that had obeyed the Empire for centuries began to whisper a dangerous word. Freedom. Emperor Valthan stood in his throne room surrounded by the broken remains of crystal statues he had smashed in his rage. The news from the Sol system was worse than defeat. It was humiliation. Grand Admiral Zephyrus knelt before him, his blue crystal body dim with shame. "Explain to me," Valthan said, his voice like grinding glass, "how 3,000 ships lost to a few hundred primitives." "Your Majesty," Zephyrus began, "they fight. Unlike any species we have encountered, they do not follow the rules of civilized warfare. They use deception, speed, and weapons we have never seen before." "Excuses," Valthan spat. "The 9th Imperial Fleet has conquered galaxies. You let farmers and merchants defeat you. But even as the Emperor raged, reports were coming in from across the galaxy. The Thakari had declared independence from the Empire. The Klaxons were refusing to pay tribute. 3 entire sectors had announced the formation of something they called the Free Worlds Alliance, with humanity as a founding member. On Earth, Ambassador Yoon Tae-hyung was having the busiest week of his life. His communication system never stopped ringing as species from across the galaxy called to ask the same question. How do we join the fight against the Empire? Yoon had been a diplomat before the war, trained to be polite and careful with his words. But these were not normal times, and these beings were not interested in diplomatic language. They wanted to know if humans would help them fight for their freedom. "Of course we will help," Yoon told a delegation of Andromedan traders. "That's what allies do." Dr. Lee Yoonji was working around the clock to understand the species that were joining the alliance. As humanity's chief xenobiologist, it was her job to figure out how different aliens thought and what they needed to be happy. What she found surprised her. Most of the species in the Empire had evolved on peaceful worlds with stable climates. They had never faced the kind of challenges that made humans tough and adaptable. The Empire had conquered them, not through superior force, but because they simply could not imagine fighting back. "They're not cowards," Lee explained to Admiral Kim. "They just never learned that fighting back was an option. We're showing them something new." Captain Jong Seung-hwan was no longer commanding a converted passenger liner. His success at the Battle of Seoul had earned him promotion to admiral, and now he commanded a fleet of ships from a dozen different species. His flagship was a massive Andromedan vessel that looked like a crystal flower, beautiful and deadly. "The Andromedans are natural engineers," Jong explained to his human officers. "The Thakari are incredible miners who can work in any environment. The Klaxons have reflexes twice as fast as ours. Each species brings something special to the alliance. But bringing different species together was not easy. The Andromedans liked their ships to be works of art, beautiful to look at. The Thakari built everything for function with no decoration at all. The Klaxons communicated through scent as much as sound, which made meetings confusing for everyone else. It was Ambassador Yoon who found the solution. Instead of trying to make everyone the same, he celebrated their differences. Andromedan ships became the flagships of alliance fleets, beautiful symbols of hope. Thakari engineers improved every ship they touched, making them stronger and more efficient. Klaxon pilots flew escort missions, their incredible reflexes keeping everyone safe. "We're not trying to build an empire," Yoon explained to a gathering of alliance leaders. "We're building a family." Meanwhile, the empire was struggling to deal with the growing rebellion. Emperor Valthan had decided that the best way to handle the situation was to make an example of humanity. If he could crush the humans completely, the other rebels would lose heart and surrender. "Deploy all remaining fleets," Valthan ordered. "Every ship, every weapon, every soldier. We will destroy the humans and everyone who follows them." "Hi." Inquisitor Malthorn shifted nervously. "Your Majesty, that would leave the core worlds undefended. What if other species rebel while our fleets are away?" "Then we will crush them too," Valthan replied. Fear is the only thing these primitives understand. But fear was no longer working the way it used to. On world after world, species that had been loyal to the Empire for generations were questioning why they followed orders from beings who treated them like slaves. Dr. Cho was busy on Earth, working on new weapons for the growing war. But she was also working on something else: ideas. She had been talking to philosophers and historians, trying to understand what made humans different from other species. "It's not that we're braver," Cho explained to a meeting of Alliance leaders via hologram. "It's that we've had practice. Earth has ice ages, volcanoes, earthquakes, and diseases. We learn to adapt or die. Most other species evolved on stable worlds where they never faced extinction. So what do we do with that knowledge?" asked President Ko Jinsu, the newly elected leader of the Alliance. "We teach them," Cho replied. "We show them that adaptation and creativity are more powerful than fear." The Empire's counterattack came 6 months after the Battle of Seoul. 27 Imperial fleets containing over 60,000 ships began moving toward Alliance space. It was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. But the Alliance was ready. Admiral Han Myung, now commanding the combined Alliance Navy, had been preparing for this moment. She had ships from 50 different species, each one bringing their own special abilities to the fight. "Remember," she told her captains, "we're not trying to defeat them ship to ship. We're trying to show the galaxy that there's a better way to live." The final confrontation began in the Kepler system, where humanity had built its first colony outside of Earth. The Imperial fleet arrived expecting to find a handful of human ships and some primitive defenses. Instead, they found something unprecedented in galactic history: a truly unified fleet of different species, all fighting for the same cause. The battle was unlike anything ever seen before. Alliance ships used tactics borrowed from each member species. Andromedan vessels provided long-range fire support with weapons that turned enemy shields into pretty light shows. Thakari ships built like asteroids crashed directly into Imperial vessels and released boarding parties. Klaxon fighters swarmed around larger ships, their pilots making impossible turns and attacks. And at the center of it all were the humans, coordinating everything with their strange ability to adapt and improvise. Emperor Valthan himself had come to oversee the battle, commanding from his personal dreadnought, the Eternal Throne. The ship was the largest vessel ever built, 10 miles, long and armed with weapons that could crack planets. "This ends now," Valthan announced to his fleet. "Destroy them all." But as the Imperial fleet engaged the Alliance, something unexpected began to happen. Ships that had served the Empire faithfully for centuries started switching sides. Crews that had never questioned their orders suddenly remembered what they had given up when they submitted to Imperial rule. The turning point came when President Ko broadcast a message across all channels, reaching every ship in both fleets. "We are not your enemies," she said simply. "We are your neighbors. We want the same things you want: safety for our families, food on our tables, the right to make our own choices. The only difference is that we remember these things are worth fighting for." Grand Admiral Zephyrus, commanding his rebuilt flagship, received the message on his bridge. Around him, his officers listened in silence. For the first time in his long military career, Zephyrus found himself wondering who he was really fighting for. The battle raged for 3 days, but it was not won by weapons or tactics. It was won by an idea that spread from ship to ship, species to species. The idea that freedom was not something to be granted by rulers, but something that belonged to everyone by right. When it was over, more than half the Imperial fleet had joined the Alliance. The rest had retreated to the core worlds, taking Emperor Valthan with them. The galaxy had changed forever, and there was no going back. 2 years had passed since the Battle of Kepler, and the galaxy looked very different. The Free Worlds Alliance now controlled nearly half of all inhabited systems. Where once there had been tribute collectors and imperial governors, now there were elected councils and trade agreements. Where once there had been fear, now there was hope. President Ko Jinsu stood on the observation deck of New Geneva Station, the new capital of the Alliance. Outside the windows, ships from hundreds of different worlds came and went freely. Andromedan crystal vessels shared space with blocky Thakari mining ships. Klaxon fighters danced through the void like metal butterflies. And everywhere, human ships moved among them, helping to coordinate the beautiful chaos of free trade. "It's amazing," said Admiral Han Myung, joining Ko at the window. 2 years ago, most of these species had never talked to each other except through imperial translators. Now they're trading partners and friends. Ko nodded. The alliance had grown beyond anything the humans had imagined. It was not just a military alliance anymore, but a new way of organizing galactic society. Instead of one species ruling over all others, different worlds worked together as equals. But the war was not over. Emperor Valthan still controlled the core worlds of the old empire, and he had not given up his dream of galactic domination. Intelligence reports said he was building a new fleet, larger and more powerful than anything seen before. "He's calling it the Grand Imperial Fleet," Han reported. "Every remaining ship in Imperial space plus thousands of new vessels. Our spies estimate over 100,000 ships." Ko sighed. "And how many ships do we have?" "About 30,000, Han replied. "But they're crewed by beings who chose to fight, not ones who were ordered to fight. That makes a difference." In a laboratory on Earth, philosopher Im Dewan was working on humanity's most important weapon: words. Im was not a scientist or a soldier, but a teacher who studied how ideas spread and changed societies. His writings about freedom and self-determination had been translated into over 1,000 languages and were read on worlds throughout the galaxy. "The Empire rules through fear," Im wrote in his latest essay. "But fear is a weakness disguised as strength. When people stop being afraid, empires fall apart." Im's words were more dangerous to the Empire than any weapon. They spread from world to world, person to person, making beings think about questions they had never asked before. Why do we obey? What do we owe our rulers? What do we owe ourselves? On the core world of Nexus Prime, Emperor Valthan read Im's latest essay with growing fury. His crystal body flashed red and black as he crushed the datapad in his hands. "This ends now," he declared to his remaining advisors. "I will lead the Grand Imperial Fleet personally. We will destroy not just the Alliance, but every world that has read these lies about freedom." "Your Majesty," High Inquisitor Malthorn said nervously, "perhaps we should try negotiation. Many species might return to the Empire if we offered them better terms." Valthan turned on Malthorn with such fury that the small alien cowered. "Better terms? I am the Emperor. I do not negotiate with rebels and primitives." But even as Valthan prepared for war, cracks were showing in what remained of his empire. On world after world, beings were refusing to supply ships or soldiers for the new fleet. Some openly rebelled and joined the Alliance. Others simply ignored imperial orders and hoped to be left alone. The final confrontation came in the Centauri system, where humanity had built its first colony among the stars. Emperor Valthan arrived with his Grand Imperial Fleet, a force so large it blotted out the stars. At its center was his flagship, the Eternal Throne, a ship the size of a small moon. Facing him was the Alliance fleet, smaller but more diverse than ever before. President Ko had come personally to lead the diplomatic mission, while Admiral Han commanded the military forces. But both knew that this battle would not be won by weapons alone. "Open a channel to all ships," Ko ordered. "Both fleets. I want everyone to hear this." When the channel opened, Ko's voice reached every being in both fleets, from the smallest fighter pilot to Emperor Valthan himself. "My name is Ko Jinsu," she began. "I am the elected president of the Free Worlds Alliance. I am speaking to all of you today, Alliance and Imperial alike, because we are all part of the same galaxy. We all want the same basic things: safety for our families, food on our tables, the right to make our own choices about our lives." On the bridge of the Eternal Throne, Emperor Valthan snarled, "Cut that transmission." "Sir," his communications officer said, "she's broadcasting on all frequencies. I cannot block it. Ko continued speaking. We did not choose this war. We only chose to be free. But now that we are here, I want to ask every being listening to me, what are you fighting for? Throughout the Imperial fleet, crews listened in silence. Many of them had never heard anyone ask that question before. They fought because they were ordered to fight, not because they believed in what they were fighting for. Are you fighting for an empire that sees you as tools to be used? Ko asked. Or are you fighting for your right to choose your own path in life? The effect was immediate and dramatic. Ships throughout the Imperial fleet began to break formation. Some turned and flew away, their crews refusing to fight in a war they no longer believed in. Others actually switched sides, joining the Alliance fleet. Emperor Valthan watched in horror as his great fleet melted away around him. Within hours, more than half his ships had abandoned him. The rest hesitated, their crews uncertain of their loyalty. All remaining ships, Valthan broadcast, attack immediately, destroy the Alliance fleet. Some ships obeyed, but their hearts were not in the fight. Admiral Han found herself commanding not a battle, but a rescue mission, as more and more Imperial vessels surrendered rather than fight. The final confrontation came down to just two ships, the Alliance flagship Defiance and Emperor Valthan's massive dreadnought. The Eternal Throne was 10 times larger and had enough weapons to destroy a planet, but Admiral Han was not intimidated. This is Admiral Han of the Alliance fleet. She broadcast to Valthan's ship. You are alone. Your fleet has abandoned you. Surrender now and no harm will come to you or your crew. Never! Valthan screamed back. I am the Emperor. I do not surrender to primitives. The Eternal Throne opened fire with every weapon it had. Energy beams that could melt asteroids struck the Defiance again and again, but Engineer Nam's shield technology held firm, absorbing the massive ship's firepower and sending it back. For an hour, the two ships fought their duel, while the rest of both fleets watched. The Eternal Throne was more powerful, but the Defiance was faster and more maneuverable. Slowly, the massive Imperial ship began to take damage from its own reflected weapons. Finally, Admiral Han made a decision that would be remembered for centuries. Instead of destroying the Eternal Throne, she did something no one expected. She stopped shooting. Emperor Valthan, she broadcast, I am offering you one last chance. Surrender now and I will guarantee your safety and the safety of your crew. You can even keep your title if you want, but your days of ruling other species against their will are over. On the bridge of the dying Eternal Throne, Emperor Valthan looked around at his officers. Many of them were staring at him with expressions he had never seen before. Disappointment, sadness, even pity. Your Majesty, one of them said quietly, perhaps it is time. Valthan felt something he had not experienced in centuries. Doubt. For the first time he wondered if he had been wrong. Not wrong about tactics or strategy, but wrong about everything. All Imperial vessels, he said finally, his voice barely a whisper. Stand down. The war is over. The celebration that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. On 1,000 worlds, beings who had lived their entire lives under Imperial rule celebrated their freedom. The streets of every Alliance world filled with parades and festivals that lasted for weeks. But the real victory was quieter and more profound. In the months that followed, species that had been enemies for centuries began to work together. Trade routes opened between worlds that had never spoken to each other. Scientific knowledge was shared freely instead of being hoarded by Imperial bureaucrats. President Ko stood once again on the observation deck of New Geneva Station, but now she was not alone. Representatives from over 200 different species had come to sign the charter of the new Galactic Republic, a government based on cooperation rather than conquest. It's beautiful, said Ambassador Yoon, watching as ships from across the galaxy arrived for the ceremony. Who would have thought that all we had to do was ask them to be free? Ko smiled. Humans have always been good at asking difficult questions. The galaxy just needed to learn that it was okay to answer them. The charter signing ceremony was broadcast to every world in the galaxy. When it was over, Ko stepped to the podium to give the new republic's first presidential address. 2 years ago, she began, the Galactic Empire told humanity to surrender or be destroyed. We laughed at them, not because we thought war was funny, but because we knew something they did not, that no empire built on fear can last forever. She paused and looked out at the representatives of hundreds of worlds, all of them free beings who had chosen to be there. Today, we begin something new. Not an empire, but a republic. Not subjects and rulers, but partners and equals.